Yes, we cannot look at the other tab.
That's
Okay,
fine.
that's fine.
Yeah.
Let's
Okay,
talk about
religion.
religion. Okay.
What questions about God? What do you think?
Yeah, yeah, okay.
What
So
do you?
what do you think about the arguments for the existence of God?
Well, personally, I think that I'm not sure which philosopher takes this stance, but I think that when it comes to religion or the belief in God, I mean, I think the whole premise for, say, Christianity is the idea of faith, and you can't like logically prove
Yeah.
this idea that God exists.
Mm-hmm.
There's, I don't think there's any like objective proof in like the immediate world that
Yeah, yeah.
shows God is out there. You know.
But do you sort of buy the argument that sure, we can't arrive there by pure reason, but and faith maybe does play a role, but how much you put your faith in something depends on the evidence for that like thing, right? So for example, it's like, oh, I have a friend and he's like really reliable. Like every time I go to him, he does something for me, right? Or whatever it is. And sort of we have to look at the evidence of like the world around us. So like the problem of evil or like however much good stuff there is, for you to sort of make a judgment about
there's
God.
more of an interplay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there are people who it's a small portion of Christians, but I think my mum's friend is she doesn't look at the Bible whatsoever.
Wait, is she a Christian?
Yeah, she doesn't look at the Bible whatsoever.
Wait, that's kind of
She doesn't go to
sucks.
mass. She's just Christian. She's brought up Christian, and she knows of like the core values of it, like forgiveness and ethics, teaching Jesus' teachings of ethics. And it's not there's no evidence there. It's not looking at the way the disciples reacted to Jesus. It's just seeing that it's a positive force for good.
Wait. But can you really say that? Can you really say that she is a Christian? Because sort of like
that's a different conversation entirely. But ultimately, I think you can still have faith and you can still have these beliefs without any evidence. I think that's in its definition, right?
So are you sort of saying like in order for you to be a good person or sort of subscribe to Christian moral values, you don't necessarily need the evidence for God? Is that sort of what you're saying?
No, I'm just giving an example of someone who didn't necessarily look for evidence for God and chose to have some sort of faith in it based on the values that they looked at. You know, you don't. Sure, there can be interplay between reason and faith, but there are some cases where faith just arises, like essentially out of nothing. And I've seen cases where people do read through the Bible and they do come to some sort of reasonable conclusion to do with the belief in God.
Yeah.
But I don't see any possible thing where people can fully arrive at God and like through proof. Through straight
through
reason.
I think I agree with you. Yeah. I think I agree with you on the point like we can't arrive to God by proof, but I think there still should be a little bit more like, you know, that the evidence lines up with a hypothesis kind of thing. He's like, oh, in this world I think it is reasonable, but in a hypothetical world, let's just say all that happens is like evil and suffering. You probably wouldn't buy into the idea of an omnibenevolent God.
Yeah, perhaps.
There's this. I remember like seeing this like Alex Connor video. It was there's this like alternate like God theory. It's called the demiurge, which is all powerful, all knowing, but all evil.
Yeah.
And well, I guess in that world, that hypothetical world, you might postulate the demiurge, but not the sort of Christian God. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's much more into play than I perhaps think there is.
Yeah.
I mean. What do you think of religion, sort of religious structures, and how that plays into belief in God? So if you see some people do still believing in God.
Yeah.
They're still theists, but they don't subscribe as much to religious structures, to going to church or to.
So it's like you're kind of asking like, is faith and belief in God sort of a private thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay, I think the church has sort of retreated into sort of more in the mind rather than, because, you know, the Catholic Church isn't a powerful entity anymore,
Mm.
with like the dissolution of that and all that stuff, and society like becoming more secular, and there definitely is a rise in sort of private Christianity, because I feel like religion, well, if you look at it, I guess from a sort of Dawkins meme perspective, like it adapts according to the times, right, and it survives accordingly, and religion, it does actually offer, I think, quite a lot of consolation for sort of problems we might face in modern times, like, I don't know, like comparison on social media, like anxiety problems, that kind of thing. You sort of get this transcendental solution straight up to God that basically says, no, you don't need to worry about all these things. Like, you know, Jesus loves you or whatever. And that offers quite a lot of consolation, I think, for modern believers. As to whether I think they should sort of go to church or not, I think it's important to maintain it like a sense of community, right? So, I think religious faith, it doesn't make much sense to be sort of like a lone like sailboat in like a massive sea of just whatever. You need other people with you because for a few reasons. Right? One, you might end up with some very weird doctrines about God by just sort of like sitting in a room and like thinking over it. It's good to always have people sort of checking, you know, double checking like what you're thinking. Good just in terms of like emotional support, like having friends. I think that's pretty key. And I guess if you take a like if from like a more biblical theology perspective, like there's quite a lot of emphasis on community and working together as Christians to like help others or like whatever it is. Yeah.
I mean, I guess what I'd say to that is on the biblical side of things, there are actually a lot of references to sort of your inner relationship with God. I think there was a some sort of parable about God that Jesus said, where he said, "You'll have your reward in heaven."
Yeah.
Sort of close your doors when you pray. Don't show other people.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think to say that the Bible is wholly sort of supportive of community might not factually be the case. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's contradictory. Like there's contradictory things about it within the Bible.
Yeah. Oh, actually, I think I get what you mean. I know which verse you're talking about. I'd say that's probably more along the lines of you're not sort of bragging about it or being like obnoxious.
That's
right?
what it's talking.
You know, it's about you know retreating and respecting your relationship with God.
That's the whole essence of it. But there's still an idea there of a personal relationship with God, so it can happen.
Yeah.
And what would you say about communities that perhaps aren't very, or maybe you don't get along with them? Maybe you don't have a good time in these churches and you don't feel welcome.
So like if I were a Christian and I like these churches aren't welcoming.
Yeah, you are welcoming.
Okay.
Surely it would be better to pray in silence and have your own.
You know what I say to that? I think if the churches aren't like welcoming, I think they fundamentally failed as churches. Right.
Well, there's problems there. I mean, the structures like the whole Vatican. There's been historical corruption there,
and like pedophilia or whatever.
Well, there's been lots of problems, monetary problems as well, and sometimes they aren't very welcoming environments. Sometimes there are like tons of people just praising the Pope, which is fundamentally against what Christianity sort of supports, which is to
worship God and God only.
Yeah, and the Pope is the vehicle.
Yeah.
So, I think it's I don't know. It's both sides are fairly valid. I mean, sometimes community can really help and like foster a good religious journey. But other times, I think it can do the exact opposite.
I agree with you. Oh, I was actually I was. Do you mind if I move on to the question?
Go for
So
it.
I remember at one point you talking about like the sort of prayer in private and public and how that's contradictory.
Yeah.
What do you make of the sort of contradictions in the Bible?
Okay,
like that comes up quite a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah. It does,
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, look, I think as I see a lot of people online who I don't know who that guy is in those university lectures who like stands in the middle with like tons of people around him.
Oh, the professor.
He's just on the street and then he's just I'm
Oh, is he
not
like
sure
a
his name.
YouTuber or
Yeah, he's a
something?
YouTuber.
Okay.
And I see when a lot of people ask questions about God to do with the Bible, right? They always use the Bible as some sort of like just straight evidence, as in they use the presumption of God to prove God to some extent,
Right.
when answering these questions. And I think
Could you give an example?
right. So you ask, why is God so so I think all you need to do is ask about an aspect of God. So,
Right. Okay.
why is God so it does.
Or like, well, why did God create the world?
Yeah, why did God create the world? There we go. Then they go down this rabbit hole quoting
well, like for God to love the world and like
verses,
okay.
and rather than explaining some sort of non-theist perspective from God, they use the presumption of God. So you ask something about God's existence, like, if God really exists, then why is he so evil? And then you reply, well, God actually he gives us free will. For in this quote, this happens, and this. And the thing is, you're asking about his existence. That's the primary question here.
Yeah, and sort of
exists,
the theist is taking it for granted that God exists. Yes, actually, that is a very good. Yeah, that's a very good point.
I feel people do that quite a bit, especially in these YouTube shorts, like these lectures.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I think well, obviously, like maybe part of it is they're just probably not that like intelligent. But as in, the other thing, I think it's because it's a problem to do with ontotheology. So this is a term.
Yeah,
wait, did you go to that talk or?
Well, no. But I've looked a bit into.
Yeah. So it's like for those who don't know, ontotheology is basically so ontology is the study of being and like what exists, what's the nature of like reality and all that stuff, and then theology is like theologos, like God, words about God, right? And ontotheology is basically the creation of your own like subjective view on reality, right? So about how things work, like, about heaven and hell, death and afterlife, God, all that stuff, through the perspective of your theology. So having the theology as the governing sort of like principle, and then everything else falls from that. So what's happening with the sort of YouTuber is he starts with a theological like sort of framework of God exists, I'm a Christian, and from that it follows that the Bible is true, and so God so loved the world, so he sent his one and only son. He created things, and he loves everyone, and he also has to give you free will, which is the reason. So blah blah blah. So all that stuff. And the problem is that the atheist on the street, or the guy in the video, or the other guy in the video, his theological is very empty. It doesn't have a lot of stuff in it. And so because they don't share that initial like sort of theology, their ontology that follows is like just clashes. Doesn't work.
Yeah, that's a very good way of putting it.
Yeah.
In terms of the Bible, then stemming from that, I think the contradictions within the Bible doesn't permit you to cherry pick and use that as proof for God or to show God's aspects as well.
Yeah.
So even if you are doing this thing where you're presuming God and you're not on the same theological level or whatever, even then you shouldn't necessarily be cherry picking, finding all these little things from the Bible to describe God, because you could always find these other contradictory aspects to him. I mean, I remember seeing something said that the devil kills 100 times less people in total.
Oh right, in the Bible than God.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it's more of a sort of like rule book for Christians, right?
Ooh.
I think it I mean, the Bible's teachings are very foundational for legal systems nowadays.
I'd actually take the opposite.
Really?
Yeah. Well, okay. Old Testament, yes, it is very legalistic, but the whole point of the New Testament is basically Jesus, like, or like the sort of general accepted like doctrine is like Jesus died for us to wipe away our sin. We sin because we break the law, and the law is all the stuff in the Old Testament, right?
Yeah.
And because of Jesus' forgiveness, the law. Oh, like if you look at Romans, it's like actually could you just like pass me the Bible over there?
Where is it?
the big thick yellow one.
This one.
Yeah. Cheers. Okay. So
Bible.
yeah, so if you look at Romans, right? Okay, it's basically it's like the law is dead because of Jesus, right?
Oh.
Hmm. Sorry, just give me a sec.
Cool.
Okay. Hmm. Oh, okay, right. So, here. Okay. God presented him as a sacrifice of atonement through faith in his blood. He did this to demonstrate his justice because in his forbearance he had left the sins committed beforehand unpunished. He did it to demonstrate his justice at the present time, so as to be just and the one who justifies those who have faith in Jesus. So basically, it's like by having faith in Jesus, you don't need to be perfect and follow all these laws. You believe that he died for your sins, and so you don't need to follow that, or at least like you don't need to be perfect in order to achieve salvation. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you now stop following all the laws and just go around like killing people or whatever, right? It says, do we then nullify the law by this faith? Not at all. Rather, we uphold the law. So basically, it's saying that yes, right? What is the things that the law says is right and wrong in the Old Testament still applies. The difference is that we don't need to be perfect and follow the law 100% of the time in order to achieve salvation, because that's like impossible, obviously. And Jesus died for us, kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, of course, if you're as a Christian, if you're a Christian, and you can follow that, sure. But all I'm saying is that the legal systems nowadays,
Yeah.
a lot of the basis,
Yeah, that's
sort of
true. Yeah,
forgiveness, treating them as innocent until proven guilty, all of these ideals, like they're quite founded in Christianity, I think.
Speaking of legal issues in Christianity, what is your take on so we're just doing, have you started sexual ethics?
Yeah.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
So
That one.
yeah, okay, right. This is good. It's gonna get us like cancelled on YouTube. So okay, right. So things like, for example, all right, polygamy.
Yeah.
Sex in public. Like, why can't I just like strip naked and just go outside? Like, what is your take on these? Oh, actually, no, sorry. Maybe that's a bit of like a jump. So, what is your take on? Because you know the UK law comes from like the sort of biblical law, as you said. It's or like is influenced by, and there's still traces of it, right? What do you think of those last remaining traces? So I think polygamy is probably a good example. Like, that it would probably be legalized, but it isn't because of the Bible.
Yeah.
What is your stance on that?
Stance on polygamy itself, or
on the law for polygamy.
the law for.
So that outlawing it. Yeah.
I think it's well, I don't necessarily have a strong sort of standing against it or for it. Very political ones. Strong standing for or against for it. I think it's just a pretty direct representation that Christianity has strong influence on the legal system.
Yeah.
Well, that's all it is in itself.
Okay, but let's just say like an atheist comes along and says, "I want like a polyamorous relationship." Like, I don't know, like this shit's a woman. It's like both my husbands are happy with it. Why am I not allowed to do this? The only reason why I'm not allowed is because of some like stupid ass religion, right?
Yeah.
And in that case, do you think the law that outlaws polygamy should be gone?
I mean, it's difficult. It's a question more about values versus law in some sense.
Right. But don't you think that any unjust law is no law at all? Like, I mean, similar to like the sort of the banning or like the cancelling of the outlawing homosexuality laws in like the 60s or whatever, right?
I mean, look, I think naturally there are inherent problems with law. I think there are so many sort of thought experiments and little subjective things, and there are always these like narrow paths you can go down and questioning legal systems, but for the most part, a lot of the laws they work fairly well, And I don't think we can get to a point where we can create some sort of perfect law, some
Yeah.
sort of perfect thing that can be applied in every scenario and somehow work.
Yeah.
You always find these situations where, oh, this person wants to have a polyamorous relationship and they're fine with it. Well, then you question the law and you're like, why? What's wrong with that? But there'll be other cases where it is a problem. You see, like, I think it's. I think the law is that's sort of, rather than pointing out a problem with that law itself, it's pointing out just the
law itself is a problem.
Yeah, it's just an inherent issue with the law. Just
that's actually a really good point. Actually, like Aristotle thought of that point as well. Basically Aristotle over here. So basically he said the law. So he called it this is a metaphor. It's like the city of angels and the city of idiots. So. So imagine like a city of angels, like perfect people, right?
Yeah.
You don't need a law because they're always going to do the right thing, right? You only need a law if you have a city of idiots, of people who will do the wrong thing and are immoral and are selfish, right? And you need to keep them in order. And you sort of create these artificial laws to prevent people from doing things, right? Let's just say you have speeding laws, right? But in a theoretical, but the problem with, like, for example, speeding laws is like, okay, but what if I know I'm not going to crash? If there's no cars on the road, I still have to follow the speeding limit. It sucks, right? So the law sort of in itself is a problem.
Yeah.
Because in an attempt to solve problems, it's a problem in itself. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
That's a good point, yeah.
I mean, it sounds like it's stepping away from that question, but I think that more than anything, it just points to a problem in the law.
So how about, do you think it is justified to do you think a law is justified on religious grounds in a fundamentally pluralistic society?
No.
Okay. So then it should be cancelled. If there are no obvious problems to polygamy, it should be.
Oh, if there weren't any.
What are some problems of polygamy? That's a really dumb question. But
I'm not sure. I'm not. Well, I think.
No, that's a similar question. So I don't know, homosexuality in the 60s. It's like, what is the problem? Like, you have a bunch of loving partners. Why can't they just live as they want?
I think there's a pretty fundamental difference between allowing homosexuality and allowing polygamy.
Okay.
I think if you make a law for permitting homosexuality, that means two men can marry, can elope. That's fine. but if you have three, then you start going down a hole where you start allowing more.
But what's the problem with that? If everyone,
the problem is
if they're consenting.
Right? Yeah. But that's the thing. That's that presumption. If they're consenting, you can, as soon as you allow sort of large groups of people. no, but it's true. As soon as you allow large groups of people, you allow for exploitation. I mean, there's always going to be a possibility there where people. I mean, I don't know. As soon as you allow just larger groups of people, I feel like exploitation becomes a sort of factor to consider.
So basically sort of these consentful polyamorous relationships are actually more manipulative or whatever.
No. If the consentful, fine. A consentful polyamorous relationship, fine. But I'm just saying, due to the inherent problems with the law anyway, if the law were to permit that sort of thing, then there may be cases where these sort of freakish events where 2, 3, 4 people all marry and 3 of them are sort of exploiting this other one, that might be allowed under some clause of the law. As soon as you start allowing things, you end up opening doors to some horrendous things. I don't know. Sometimes it's slightly better to keep the doors a bit closed. You know.
Could you give me an example? I'm sorry, I'm not quite feeling.
So
just it can be crazy if you want.
Yeah. Okay, look, you could have 2 men and 1 woman, and the 2 men essentially force the woman into a relationship, and they just want to use her for sex, or this is another case where they just want to use the persons for money. As soon as you get more people, it's sort of this gang up culture. I feel like that's a possibility. It sounds slightly ludicrous, but I think that what could happen. I mean, it already happens in some cultures where I don't know, very old ancient cultures in some parts of Asia where the woman is essentially the owner
object,
man, right?
yeah, okay.
I mean, how do you think? How do you think? Do you think that would get better if you started allowing polyamorous relationships? I think the opposite. I think you'd get people who exploit it even more. You could have.
How about in like modern Britain?
Right, yeah, that's the thing. I think you can have these examples where modern Britain, which is, I mean, we've developed very nicely in that regard, and you have people who are consentful, and it can work very well.
Yeah.
But then in some cultures where they haven't developed so nicely, and there's some
like
disparity,
rough around the edges.
yeah, and there's some disparity in power
Yeah,
dynamics between men and women, or women and men, whatever it may be. I think when you start permitting these larger marriages or
problems
whatever
arise.
it is, yeah.
Yeah,
I think elements of exploitation worsen. You know.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's crazy to say, but I don't know. For me, in my mind, it kind of makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, that does make sense. Okay. How about this? Okay, this is sort of our last
Alright.
a bit, but it's a bit crazy. Okay, this is regarding
this
is regarding sexual ethics again.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, why am I not allowed?
Yeah.
Or am I allowed? I think I might. I don't know if I am.
No, you're
I'm about to say that was devious. I was about to say it was devious thing ever. No, but basically the question is, it's like, is there any significance beyond the physical?
Yeah.
Like beyond the like physical acts of like sex or whatever. Like, I don't know why I'm like. Why is there social taboo of me, like, I don't know, let's say like fucking like a fillet of fish? Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like obviously it's stupid, right? But and it's like it's ludicrous. Like if you picture it in your head, like, it's bad, right?
No,
but
makes sense.
why is that a taboo?
Yeah.
Like to me, that sort of points to like either okay, it's just completely cultural and human beings are just weird, right? Or two, there is something more than just the physical going on here.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, if you, I don't know.
Go down it.
I think there's just a natural element of. I mean, just as it's weird to fuck a filet of fish, it's also weird to have sex with someone just in public. And I feel like just sex has a natural privacy about it. And honestly, if you want to fuck a filet of fish, you can. But I don't think it's seen as like, it's just people just don't really want to see it. You know?
Yeah.
I think there's just an element of that where people are like, alright, go for it. Just
do it in your own room.
Yeah,
Don't talk to me about it.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
What is that going to be the structure? Like we do series, and then you skip the YouTube video, and you just see, you hear some crazy shit, you're like, what the fuck? Like, imagine.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But sexual ethics is really interesting because I don't know. It's you can have all these moral ideas, but sexual ethics, it seems like it just brings it down more into reality.
Yeah.
Because what was that example in that lesson we were talking about with Fisher? No, not Fisher. Fletcher. Sorry.
Yeah.
Fletcher, the
situation ethics.
Yeah. No. The prostitute. Oh, have you not looked at that yet?
Oh, was it in the German camp? Like yeah.
So like,
so, do you want to explain to this?
No, you're better explaining.
Okay, so it was like I'm pretty sure it was basically, should Christians condemn a woman in a German concentration camp becoming a prostitute in order to save her own life? Was that it?
I'm pretty sure it was
something along those lines.
A woman going to Fletcher and saying, "Look, I'm a Christian, and I kind of the world is kind of obligating me to have sex with this spy just to get some information." That's kind of this thing, and you basically answer yes or no. Should she have sex with this guy to potentially get the like war-changing information or whatever? And I remember thinking it's kind of like I think there's an element of attraction to it. It sounds ridiculous, but if the woman's attracted to the man from a utilitarian standpoint, you could say, right, well, if information is coming out of it and they both enjoy the sex, ultimately maybe that is the right thing to do. And it's like sometimes these ethical ideas can go just a bit wonky. I don't know, beyond wonky and everything, but as soon as you bring it down into reality with something like sexual ethics, where real world things do matter, like the pleasure of the sex or the attraction or something that sounds trivial, but it really is quite important in these problems. I think it's important to think about sexual ethics like that. I don't know about fillet of fish, but, but yeah.
Okay, should we call it there then?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I think maybe next episode a good place to pick up is is there any ontological, like, significance of, like, let's just say things around, like, sex that goes beyond and above the physical? That is a good question.
Yeah.
Join us next time.